Thank you. I'm Chris Winter from Student Life, and I told Eric that I was going to steal 5 minutes of his time to talk a little bit about our student care team, the proactive piece, so that hopefully we're not going to get to a space where we're looking at active shooters on campus. So in case you were unaware, we do have a care network here at OSU. So what I've handed to you, this first piece is just more information about Student Life if you're more really curious. Please feel free to read through that in all your spare time. And then on the inside, you'll see we have some information here about our care network. So if at any time you feel that there's an immediate threat to the health and safety of an individual student or a community, the best thing to do, don't worry about which care network resource to use, just call 911 or 77000 if you're on a line on campus. And that would connect you with our dispatch center on campus, OSP and DPS. And then for non-emergency concerns and consultations, we have a couple of different options for you that are part of our care network. We have 3 different teams: a student assistance team, a student care team, and a threat assessment team. Basically, you'll notice that there's a theme under all those teams. There's the exact same phone number. So you don't need to really think about which team does it go to. That all goes to the same number. It's the Office of the Dean of Student Life, and then we can triage and figure out where it's best to go. But just so you're aware of the resources, the student assistance team is a group of folks from different departments in student affairs that handle low to moderate level problems during the week. So if someone calls the Dean of Students office and a parent says, my kid's homesick and I don't know what to do, we'll have someone from our team call them back and walk them through some resources. Or if we have a student say, I don't know who my academic advisor is, we can do some digging and find that out. This is helpful for faculty and staff. It's for students, parents, faculty, staff. So especially if you're new to campus and you're wondering, I'm not sure if we have a resource that would help a student with experiencing hunger and they can't afford groceries. Do we have one on campus? So you could call that and get some more information from our office. The next thing you'll see is our student care team. This is a group of folks. We meet 2 hours every week. It's people from all over across divisions at OSU. We have members from CAP, Student Health, Student Conduct, Dean of Students, Disability Access Services, International Programs, Graduate School, Oregon State Police, Department of Public Safety, Student Health, CAPS. I know I'm missing people. There's a bunch of people that meet. And we talk about students that are popping up on multiple radars, students that are giving us some concern. Someone calls and there's a student whose issue is a little more complicated than just pointing to one resource. This group can put our heads together. We have experts from different areas in the room that can put our heads together and think about how do we want to best outreach to that student. They obviously need a little more hands-on. If you refer someone to the student care team, and I'm looking at some of you because you've experienced this, it doesn't necessarily mean you're off the hook, but sometimes this group will put our heads together and think of how we want to best outreach, but students respond better when it's someone they know contacting them. So oftentimes, instead of some creepy person from the Dean of Students, that would be me calling and saying, hey, I heard that you're having a problem with fill in the blank, and I'm here to help you. I think, how did you know that, and who are you? But if it's someone that they know and that they connect with who's able to walk them through resources, that's good. The main point of that is you're not alone in having to figure out how to solve these complex problems, that we have this group of folks that can meet and figure that out and try to help. And then we have a threat assessment team. Sergeant Judah will talk about that a little bit more. This started last fall, so it's a group of just represented from 5 different areas: public safety, DPS, human resources, counseling and psychological services, Dean of Students, and then we have general counsel as our advisor. That we meet weekly as well. We talk about students, faculty, staff, or visitors to campus that may be a threat to the safety of our community. And this group sometimes needs to mobilize quick to make some quick decisions, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that there. But those are just some resources there for you if you have questions or concerns about extended care and being proactive if you see someone that you think is struggling or at risk. My main advice to you would be trust your gut and consult. If you think something's wrong, it doesn't hurt to consult, and it shouldn't be something that you're taking on alone. The other things here, counseling and psychological services, you know they're physically open 8 to 5, but this number works 24/7, so it's after-hour crisis as well. And then student conduct, if you have someone that's disrupting the work or learning environment, student conduct would be a good office to connect with. And then on the back, because our website is lovely, but sometimes it's confusing to navigate and figure out, especially if you're newish and you're not even sure the name of the office that you're looking for. These are just some frequently called numbers for helping students in crisis or students of concern. The other thing is, as you're doing this, sometimes it can be a real strain on you as a staff member. So remember that we have employee assistance program that offers some assistance and counseling to faculty and staff, free visits. So utilize this, because sometimes taking care of others can mean that that's you have to take care of yourself to be able to help others as well. Thanks. You're welcome. Did I make it? 5 minutes? I totally did. So, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Sergeant Eric Judah.
So I apologize if I might seem rushed, but apparently I gotta go
I just gave a threat assessment sign.
to assist on something. So normally this takes me about 45 minutes and then maybe 15 minutes longer with questions to actually a much larger group. So I think we should be able to do just fine here. Is it okay if I stay in? Should I stay in? Okay. So again, my name is Eric Judah. I'm the sergeant here with the Oregon State Police assigned to OSU. I've been here for about 3 years now. I've got a little over 20 years on the department in various locations. A little bit in Eastern Oregon when I first started out in Burns, then Albany for quite a while, Salem for a little bit, and then here at OSU for the last 3 years. Getting to OSU was kind of a challenge for me in the sense I didn't want to go there. I don't want to go to OSU. And so I got over here to my lieutenant at the time. And the reason being is because it is so much different. It's different work than what troopers normally do. But in reality, it's exactly the same type of work that I was doing in Burns when I first came on, which was community-oriented policing. When you're out there running to crashes, grabbing Deweys, arresting people wanted in cars, traveling on the highways, you don't get involved in your community at all. It's not like you can pull a bunch of cars over and have a public meeting or something. So this actually goes back to when, I'd like to. This actually goes back to when I started in Burns and we had a lot more interaction with the community. We sat on committees, we went and did public presentations in a lot of schools and things like that. So I got to OSU as a kind of a job trade with the sergeant that was here. He wanted some experience outside of OSU to kind of make him a little bit more marketable for promotion. And so I went here kind of reluctantly. And after about 3 months, I thought, I'm having fun. I like it here. So I asked to make it permanent, and we're going on, 3 years now. So, and then, like Katie said, I got the promotion to the station commander's job here, which I start December 1st. And so I take over that. So I'm here to stay for at least a little while longer. So getting here, I started setting on the student care team meeting every Tuesday. Kind of while I'm just sitting there listening, going, what did I get myself into? And then realizing, hey, what they're trying to do is help these kids out, be successful, and maybe we can assist with that in a law enforcement aspect and try not to make it a traumatic law enforcement experience, or maybe they just need advice on how to navigate, around the legal stuff when students do get in trouble. So started participating in that, and as we got into that, it started, a few of these cases we get there, we're like, oh, time out. This person, we need to pay them some special attention because of, the threat that they're posing to the community. They might not be saying they're going to do something, but their behavior shows that they are a threat, whether it's to their dorm, to their roommate, or to the campus as a whole. And that threat might range from stalking another student, or it might be somebody who has suicide ideation or even homicidal ideation. So, I started talking with Chris a little bit, and together Chris and I found an association called the Threat Assessment Professionals. We started looking into that. We realized that what we really needed was a threat assessment team that would take on these threats to the community and not necessarily a care team. And the threat assessment team needed to also look at faculty, staff, and visitors to the university, everybody. Because we're not just talking students that could be a threat, it could be, and again, we've had a couple here, you heard about the pursuit on campus that we had, it's the boyfriends. And for some reason, we've had about 3 cases this fall where it's been a boyfriend that has been left at home You know, while girlfriend goes off to college, boyfriend sits home, gets all jealous, and starts acting out. So those are the type of threats that we need to look at. So I started giving this, we started the threat assessment team a little over a year ago after organizing it for about a year. And then also about that time, I started to give this active shooter presentation to a lot of faculty and staff. And this year I started to give it to student organizations. In doing so, Rebecca Mathern down at the registrar's office said, hey, I have this national group. We meet in Anaheim at the Disneyland Resort Hotel. And we would like you to come down and present active shooter for our conference. And I said, you're gonna pay for my flight, you're gonna pay for my food, pay for my hotel. I gotta talk for an hour and a half, and I get to hang out at Disneyland for a while. So I just got back. I gave the presentation Monday, so that's why it still says, you know, the audience up there. So it went real well. This is actually, I modified the slides and my presentation to fit the conference. So I'm just going to keep using it. I think it does really well. But again, anytime during this, if you have questions about what I'm presenting, or if I'm not covering something that you have a question for, please ask. These are the things that I'm hopefully going to cover, why we talk about it. One is we need to understand what is an active shooter. It's been called a lot of things. And I guess we don't always want to think of it as a shooter. If you look just yesterday or maybe the day before, the stabbing in Merced, think of it as an active threat. That could be it. It could also be explosives or something like that. And two, you don't always have to think of these things as a shooter. Sometimes it could just come up as a stalking issue, a harassment issue, and things like that. Then putting active shooter in perspective, just comparing it to other things that we deal with, surviving an active shooter actual incident. We'll talk about that. How to prevent active shooter and how to recognize possible threats and how to confront them. So I might not get into the last one too much, but how do we prevent the active shooter? And I'll kind of circle back around to the whole threat assessment thing and hopefully tie it in to that. Okay, so what is an active shooter? And this is all throughout this presentation. There's really no original Eric Judah ideas or material. I might talk about Eric Judah ideas, but everything really I'm presenting is in open documents that you all can find. I have a source page. I take a little picture of them and put them on there. Most of them are government studies. There is one book that I reference, but all the information is out there. And a lot of these studies are all studies that have looked at active shooter incidences in the United States under various parameters. One study looked at every known active shooter incident stretching from January 1st, 1900 to December 31st, 2008. So it encompasses everything. And then some of them are a little bit narrow. There's one in particular that addresses these incidences at college and universities, while others just address K through 12. So basically an active shooter is active, and it is an incident in which both responding law enforcement and citizens, that's you, have a potential to affect the outcome of the event based upon our responses. And then this is the definition they give: individual engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined populated area. And it could be individual or individuals. I think there's 2 cases in a lot of them where there were 2 perpetrators. And then confined is not necessarily relevant anymore, since some of these things do happen in open spaces. What is it not? And so these are the things basically that they're not. However, it could also not be an incident between 2 people, maybe a crime of passion. An example would be you have residents that live on campus. There is a murder relating around jealousy, and it's one person deceased, one person suspect, things like that. That wouldn't really fall under an active shooter incident. At the time, we might not know that, but when everything's all investigated, wrapped up, it wouldn't fall under that. So active shooter in perspective, and the reason I started doing this is because when I started doing this presentation, I got feedback. I always get feedback, but part of the feedback was people were very apprehensive about even talking about this. It's very traumatic. It's in the media. It's right up front in the media. You know, even the ones that are just maybe not really, nobody got hurt or anything. I mean, the media is going to put that up on the 5 o'clock news and tell us all about it. So what these things are is they're a high intensity, low frequency event. They don't happen very often, contrary to what we see on the media. But when they do, they are absolutely devastating, especially with all the social media that's out there and all the other medias out there. So this study right here, this quote came out of there. Compared to the other types of violence and crime that children face, both in and outside of school, school-based attacks are rare. And it might not feel that way, again, if you look at the recent history of the past 20 years, 25 years, there has been an increase in these things. And there's various theories on why there's been an increase. But overall, they are, again, a low-frequency event. Oh, so this is a slide that we all have to guess at. So, can anybody tell me what is the leading cause of death for this age group? I was going to give you a hint. I used to teach driver's ed. That was really tough. Basically, accidents, not just car accidents, but any type of accident is the leading cause of death. And this is based off CDC's 2013 statistics. But unintentional injury, that's an accident. So a little over 11,000 young adults, teenagers, will lose their life in a year due to accidents. Then suicide. And then what active shooter would fall under would be homicide. So active shooter is just a small portion of homicide. So, and I'll get to the active shooter numbers at the end, but this is just to keep in perspective again how this thing affects us. The Clery Act. Yeah, one thing, I get here to OSU, my Clery, Title IX, purple. So I think I'm pretty well versed now on those things. But so this is another source material, and these are, of course, older numbers. I just have not incorporated the OSU Clery numbers into my presentation yet. We'll get there at some point. But these are nationwide numbers. So according to Clery, that's the amount of crime. So almost a 250,000 incidences of crime reported on university campuses. And of those, almost 75% are burglaries and motor vehicle theft. Burglary is when anybody enters a premise, whether that's a dwelling that people live in or not a dwelling, and they steal something, or they intend to steal something, and then motor vehicle theft, obviously, stealing a motor vehicle. Then just over 9% are aggravated assaults, a little over 8% robberies, and a robbery is different than a burglary. Robbery is, you get held up, give me your purse, so I'm gonna break your arm, type of thing. That's a robbery. Forcible sex offenses, almost 6%. Arson, a little under 2%. Non-forcible sex offenses, 0.1%. And then murder on college campuses is 0.1%. And this would be where active shooter falls into. So as you can see, the incidences of active shooter are far less in relative terms on where it falls within the university, on university campuses. There's another slide. So traffic safety information. So again, a lot of my history working with the department, my experience has been in traffic enforcement. And a lot of that has been, I was like hell on wheels when it came to getting the DUI driver off the road. And a lot of that stemmed from my early days of cleaning up tragedies from active shooter, or not active shooter, from DUI. cleaning up those tragedies. I mean, you can't, I mean, all of a sudden, you know, you're just doing your job, and all of a sudden you got to call a fatal crash, and now you got this tragedy to deal with, plus you got somebody who caused it, and you want to hold them accountable. So I became real aggressive in DUI enforcement, and so I paid really close attention to what I wanted to do there, and got rather good at it, but also paid attention to how that affects us. And there's the information. So according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in 2013, and these roughly stay constant, there is a fluctuation from year to year, but over 32,000 people died on our highways related to a car crash in the United States. 32,000 people. And of that, 10,000 people die from DUI crashes a year. This is absolutely preventable in my mind. It is preventable. But for some reason, I think we as a society, we accept a certain degree of death when it comes to DUIs. If we didn't, our laws would be a lot tougher than they are. If you get arrested for DUI, that's a Class A misdemeanor. It's not a felony, it's a misdemeanor. So I you know, again, this is a tough one for me because I truly believe that this is absolutely preventable. Also, about the same number die from not putting their seatbelt on. How easy is it to put the seatbelt on? And you know, before being a state trooper, I really didn't, I put my seatbelt on, but I really didn't understand why. And now, after being a trooper and again, cleaning up those tragedies, I know that a seatbelt will more likely than not save your life in a motor vehicle crash. Far more likely than it causing injury to where you die. So these are things that we can fix so easily, but we seem to let these things go. And so, active shooter, and this, I put this in there, this is that Oklahoma City thing earlier in October, where and you know, we don't even have an idea on what this deal is, except she's been charged here recently with 4 counts of murder. So it's not an accident, it's murder. So there's some type of culpable mental state behind that. And we'll find out a little bit more later on. So active shooter. So this study right here is one that I'm going to lean on pretty heavily. It studied 160 incidences in 14 years. 160 incidents of active shooter, and they really narrowed down what active shooter was and the location and things like that. So this one really fits our need. And again, this is over a 14-year period. And in that 14-year period, compared to those other stats that I showed you, 486 people have died in 14 years from active shooter. So again, it's a high intensity but a low frequency event. We need to I need to be up here talking to you about it. I need to talk to everybody on campus about it, quite frankly. And we need to have an awareness about it. But I want our awareness to be at a point where it doesn't cripple our day-to-day lives. It doesn't stop us from coming to work every day and doing our job and interacting with people. But it creates enough of awareness to where we recognize that something isn't right. We see somebody's behavior is questionable, and it raises the hair on the back of our neck. But it should be something to where it's kind of like clicking that seatbelt, to where it's a habit. You're doing so much to protect yourself just by putting that seatbelt on. You don't really realize what you're doing at the time, and that you are saving your life or the lives of people in your car. And that's what we need to do with active shooter. We need to definitely have a situational awareness of what's going on. We need to be aware of our surroundings. But again, I don't want people to be so afraid of this thing occurring that it stops our day-to-day function. And hopefully after today, you'll have a little bit, hopefully we progress and we develop those systems in order to try and recognize this behavior. And all that starts at your level too. Any questions so far about these things? So, let's see, a little bit more about active shooter from this study is, in that study, we're very worried about where we set higher ed, but out of those 160 incidences, 12 of them, 160 incidences, 12 of them occurred at an institute of higher ed over a 14-year period. More likely, you're going to run into this phenomenon in the business, area of commerce, shopping mall, strip mall, movie theater, or maybe K through 12, areas. So those have the higher incidences. We on higher education, a little bit less of a frequency. In fact, the government area is quite a concern when it comes to this issue. And then of those incidences in higher ed, like I said, there were 12 of them. And these are the breakdown of those 12 of who the shooters were. So 5 former students, 4 current students, 2 employees, and a patient at a medical school. And then I threw this slide in because I found it interesting. It's not an excuse not to come to work on Friday, but it's actually kind of interesting on why it's there. Yeah. Nothing on Saturdays. So I was kind of surprised about the Sunday thing myself, but Fridays. And then also, kind of where I'm going to lead into with the whole surviving and how to, surviving an active shooter is that 64% or 64 of the 160 instances studied, which of those 64, let's see, the duration could be assessed, and then of those 64, 44 of them ended in 5 minutes or less, and 23 ended in 2 minutes or less. As our agency here on campus, we pride ourselves, police-wise, with a 5-minute response to campus. And that's a fast response. And that is taking into account people moving about campus. Because it's hard to drive through campus, let alone turn the lights and sirens on. And try and drive through campus, it's nearly impossible. So 5 minutes is probably our fastest response time from one side of campus to the other. So 69% of the time, these things are going to end prior to our arrival. And in fact, they're going to end very quickly at times. Male shooters acted violently against women in 10% of them, and in those cases, the target was a current or estranged or former wife or girlfriend. So, and that's quite a high number. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get toward threat assessment. So, how do these things end? And again, my point is going to be that, yeah, police can respond, and hopefully we can get there and end it quickly, but the fact of the matter is that it's going to have to be you guys and other students. It's going to have to be people that want to stop this thing to take action. 56% the shooter initiated the ending either by suicide, or they stopped shooting, or they fled. 23% of the shooter committed suicide before the police arrived. 21%, this is where you all fall in, unarmed citizen involved, which involved a principal, a teacher, staff, or other student. So this is a higher possibility of us getting this thing stopped than the police arriving. Also, some cases, an armed citizen was involved, and in fewer cases, an armed off-duty police officer was involved. But we've all seen them in the news. A lot of times the shooter initiates the ending by suicide. A lot of those times they'll commit suicide once they engage police or once they know police show up. And they all know the police are coming. In a lot of these incidences, there's enough information that lead investigators that we know that they understand how these things have played out in the past, and they know that the police are coming. What they don't want, time and time again, if you do the case studies on these, is they don't want resistance. And resistance seems to cause them problems with proceeding, whether that's an unarmed citizen resisting them or the police coming. They're banking on that everybody's going to be fleeing and everybody's going to be cowering and nobody's going to be fighting back. So the meat of this is the run, hide, fight protocol that we decided to adopt a while back. Talking with Michael Bamberger and some other people, there were some other protocols out there, but DHS, Department of Homeland Security, put out this very simple protocol called Run, Hide, Fight. And you can find it on their website. They've got posters. ASOSU put out their posters with the same thing, Run, Hide, Fight. That's the one we've been preaching. Again, there's others that are out there, but some of them sometimes are a little complicated, and then others are probably a better fit toward K through 12, where you don't have kids, you have children basically that need more guidance than having the ability to make a decision. Plus, you don't want to really teach elementary kids to do the fight part. The other protocols fit them a lot better. So these are some key points to remember to survive one of these incidences. The time between the onset of violence and the first responders' arrival is critical. This is the time when the most damage is done, and that's within that 5-minute period. Are you mentally prepared to act? You have to make that conscious decision that, yes, I am going to do something if this happens. And there has been numerous cases, and we don't always hear about them in the news because nobody gets shot, where an unarmed teacher, I think there was one in Washington where a kid showed up making threats, had a gun, and an unarmed teacher took the kid into custody without anybody getting hurt. So you've got to make that mental preparedness. And it's difficult sometimes, I think, for me to stand up here. I think it's easy for me to stand up here and tell you to do that, because since I was 18, I've either been in the military or the state police, and I've always had that in my mind. As a state trooper, I could go out today on my way home and stop a car, and when I walk up on that car, or when I'm stopping it, I'm thinking, what if they jump out with a gun? What do I do? Do I have everything? Do I go here? Do I do this? So I do it on a daily basis, and it's almost like clicking a seatbelt. I don't really think about it, I do it. But what I'm asking you all to do is to really step outside yourself and say, okay, if I'm going to do this, can I do it, and how would I do it? And part of that is what-ifing a scenario. We do it, athletes do it. They always play out mental scenarios in your mind and say, okay, if this happens, do I do this, or how do I do that? So it can be done, and mental preparation and mental scenarios are very valuable if you lack the ability to actually train in a scenario. The biggest thing to keep in mind and this helps with the mental preparedness, are to understand that you are responsible for your personal safety. You are responsible for it. And it's hard to push this one with the younger adults and teenagers, because I think sometimes they think that, well, that's not my responsibility. The university is responsible for my safety. Yes, we have some responsibility there as a university to provide a safe environment, but ultimately the safety of walking across campus at night, in an unsafe situation, falls on the individual. We can do everything we can to make it a safe walk, but ultimately the responsibility falls on the person. And then also to remember that you are the immediate responder in these incidences. They're not gonna, if somebody were to walk into this building right now and see us and look into this and see me, and they had intent to be an active shooter, guarantee you they would turn around and walk away. They don't want me here. They don't want the resistance. So they're not gonna do this when the police are present. And you can, if you go back and look at all the case studies in the last 25 years, there nowhere in any of these was there a police presence in the location of where these things occurred. So keep in mind, you are the immediate responder. And with that in mind, the quicker you act, the less damage is going to occur. And you got to understand that. The quicker you act, the less damage is going to occur. Hesitating is going to just prolong the violent act. Also, if you act as a hostage, in an active shooter situation, it can cause extreme trauma. And at the conference on Monday, I actually referenced the young man down at UCC that Air Force veteran, I believe, that stood up and tried to, hey, confront the shooter, say, you don't want to do this, you don't need to do this. He ended up getting hurt. He's lucky he wasn't killed. In that incident, I think the perpetrator purposely did not kill him. He shot him to wound him. But then when he was lying on the ground, he said something to him, and then he actually tried to kill him. So he's very lucky. But these perpetrators they're not coming in with any other intent except to kill people and morbidly to create a higher body count than the person who did it before them. They study the past incidences they study them hard, and they try to improve on them by increasing the body count and giving themselves more of a time in between when they pull that trigger and the police respond. So they're not interested in taking hostages, they're not interested in stealing anything, they are just interested in that. So don't even think that you can try to negotiate with them. Quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect your life. But also, and I added this in because it was brought to my attention by somebody on a student care team that we need to consider this. And I was like, you're absolutely right. There's going to be people in our classes, in our office buildings, that cannot do the run, hide, fight because of some physical limitation. So I think it falls on us to be their protectors and to help them. If we're going to choose to either fight, run, or hide, we need to help those people also and not leave anybody behind. So now, run, hide, fight. This is not any particular order. You might hear another presenter at some time tell you that you first need to run, then if that doesn't work, then hide, then if that doesn't work, as a last resort, fight. I don't believe in that, and I'll tell you why. Because the situation is going to be fluid. It's going to be dynamic. It might be different for somebody sitting closer to the door than somebody sitting away from the door. If the person walks through the door and there's there's a student right there, their choice might be to fight right then and there, while my choice over here might be to duck for cover. So it's going to be different for where you're at. Just for police officers, we have this, we call it the force continuum, but it's not really a continuum. But the one side of the continuum is officer presence, while the far end of the continuum is deadly physical force. But there's all kind of these other steps in between. But you don't need to go 1, 2, 3 in order to get to the last one. You can go from number 1 to the last one if that's what the situation presents. So just keep that in mind. Even when law enforcement was present or able to respond within minutes, civilians often had to make life and death decisions and therefore should be engaged in the training and discussion on decisions they may face. And that's why we're here. So run is just the first one in the series of slides. And when you do this, these are some things to keep in mind. If you have the opportunity to not be in the same area, shoot or get away. Have an escape route and plan in mind. And as I talked earlier about the mental preparedness and the what-ifing, this should be kind of a common practice, again, like clicking your seatbelt. You walk into a classroom or any room, or a movie theater, or a shopping mall, or the supermarket, and you kind of look around, okay, where can I escape? Where's the nearest exit? How do I get out of here? And then how can I get out of here? Keeping in mind that if you are escaping or running, that you can try and use cover and concealment to hide your path. Always keep moving. There's a couple of just key principles of combat, and one is to move all the time, because a moving target is hard to hit, very hard to hit compared to a stationary target, but very hard to hit, even for a very experienced marksman. So moving is a key if you are going to move. And then we'll get into the hiding here in a minute. Also, keeping your hands visible, that's a key one for law enforcement. We always want to see the hands, because if the hands are empty, there's nothing. I can protect myself a lot easier against just empty hands than I can if a knife or a gun or a taser or something is in the hands, a tool is in the hands. So if we come into the situation, we like to see the hands of people. And then hide. So if you decide to quit moving and you're gonna hide, and maybe you run, you hide, you run again, to be silent, also to silence your electronic devices. If possible, lock or barricade your location, hide an area out of the active shooter's view, turn off the lights, and suspect they do know they are under a time constraint, and may pick a path of least resistance. Again, this goes back to the morbid thought of them and how they're trying to just increase the body count. So if they do run into something that's going to slow down their progress, even though it might not be the best barricade that it could be, if it slows them down too long, they're going to move on. Some ethical things that come up with this are, what if we barricaded and there's people out there that they also need to seek cover. And that's one of those in-the-moment decisions that you're going to have to make, and I can't tell you how to make it. If it was me, I'd do everything I could to try and protect the people. They might not know exactly where the threat is. So again, those are hard moral conversations to have, but they're sometimes good conversations to have after this presentation. Usually I try and refer that back to your work group because you know your building, you know the stuff that's in it, the tables and things like that, on how you can maybe barricade an office or a classroom or something. And then also keeping in mind the cover and concealment part. If you're going to hide behind something, there's nothing in this room that is going to stop a bullet. I guarantee you. Nothing. The wall is going to probably stop a bullet. The old brick and mortar buildings, there'll probably be more of those that are going to stop a bullet. That piece of steel beam right there, that'll do it. Car doors don't stop bullets. So just keep that in mind when you are hiding behind something. That it might just be concealing you, but it's not going to provide you protection. The fight or engage. And this is, again, I don't agree with this, but when your life is in imminent danger, but this can also be somebody else's life. That's why I don't agree with it. There is a part of us, we're all human, that we are, if anybody's a parent, you're gonna protect your family. And that might even extend to your work family, or just, the family of human beings, where we're going to protect each other. So if somebody else's life is in danger, you might choose to take action also, even though your life isn't in immediate danger. Here's one of those key principles of combat, and that is, along with moving, is to attack with surprise, without warning. Do not warn, just attack. Also attack in numbers if you can, and overwhelm. That might be something where you think, well, that might be impossible to try and coordinate our effort and get consensus to do this, but I think you'd be surprised in the heat of the moment. I think people have a natural instinct to come together and protect themselves and others. Also attempt to incapacitate the shooter, and again, I don't want to get up here and tell you to kill somebody. I really don't want to do that, but I want you to do what I want you to teach you, and they don't teach us that either. Contrary to what you might hear in the media, they teach us to stop the threat. And whatever that takes, is to stop the threat, and then you're done. So a lot of times when that happens, stopping the threat, they get killed. But what you're going to do is try and stop the threat. Whatever that takes is to stop the threat. Improvise a weapon. You might need a weapon to stop a threat. Look around your office space on what you have to use as a possible weapon. It might not be a whole lot. In my office, I did, you got a laptop, which some of the laptops have a knife type edge to them, especially the Apples, and then also like a 3-hole. If you're gonna hit somebody, don't hit them with the flat part, hit them with the sharp part. And then also a 3-hole punch. That's all I got in my office. So, but fire extinguishers. I don't know, if you have those around here. Sometimes buildings do. The older buildings might have axes with the fire extinguishers, but you'd be surprised if you put some thought into it. You'll see that there might be some stuff around there. Also, another principle of combat is move hard, move fast, and commit to the action. If you do not commit to what you are doing, I guarantee you, whoever you're going against will gain the upper hand. It's so basic in wrestling, in martial arts, and in boxing, that if you don't commit to your attack and your assault, you could get overwhelmed, and the table would have turned on you. And that's kind of it on Run, Hide, Fight in a short period of time. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Are you going to make these slides available?
These slides available?
Yeah.
You know, I'd much rather present it,
Yeah.
because I think there's a bit of, there's that interaction I can have. I think it has a little bit more meaning than just making my slides available. So I'd much rather, I'm available, and I can bring the slide. So I'd much rather do that, although I don't want to rob people of the information. I don't want to keep information from people. That's why the reference up here to this DHS website.
I really can't.
Yeah, you can't see it, but I do have the references and everything, and you can just Google DHS Run, Hide, Fight, and you'll get that. In fact, you'll get a little video. It'll put it all together.
Patricia, we're also recording this, and I'll make the video
Yes.
available to you.
Right. We're just trying to run our office
I
and
understand.
cover this, and some really surprising things happened, even though this was scheduled. And so I was hoping to be able to,
Yeah.
because it's.
You know,
so important.
again, if it came down to it, I would give you the slides. I mean, I don't want to keep the information from anybody. I just think it has a little bit more of a, especially if people have questions and things like that and stuff. Yes?
So we've had discussion in our department, in our office, and we're just down one floor, about panic buttons. I was on the committee, the emergency committee, when we were over in Kerr, and there was talk about panic buttons, under desks and stuff. So, are those available?
Well, I just sent her a security assessment that the Department of Public Safety did for this building. And this building, they don't build buildings with a lot of those security details in mind. So one problem with some of those security buttons on campus is they're all tied into the old telephone lines. And Michael Bramberger has tested them, and it could take anywhere from 2 minutes to 5 minutes for the signal to actually get here. Yes. So the best way to do it is to pick up a desk phone, dial 911, leave it unhooked, because it's going to go straight to 911, and we're going to know where it's coming from. We're going to know exactly where it's coming from. Cell phone, we don't know where it's coming from. We don't know that location until we ping a cell phone, which could take an hour, to do. So 911 from a hard line will tell us exactly where you're at. And there are some work groups that talk about coded messages over an intercom system, and those can work out. It's hard for me to stand up here and suggest to do that or what that would be, because I'm not as integrated into your work system as you are. But it is a good discussion to have. Are we going to do this, and what should it be? And then at what level are you going to, notify public safety and state police and say, yeah, we got somebody here that's acting kind of weird, can you come over? Versus calling 911 and get here now type of thing. Where do you draw that line? And I think we all know what that line is. I think we all have a good idea on what is an emergency and what is not, but it can get pretty gray at times. There's times where I see emails that I'm like looking at them and it's like 2 weeks old, and I'm like, why didn't they call us when they were there, when it happened, when the person was in the office? Instead we get notified 2 weeks later that so-and-so was in an office and behaving so poorly that they wanted us to know, but they told us 2 weeks later. I think it's better to kind of act, what we know now compared to 20, 30 years ago. I think it's better to make that call to public safety and state police to let us know something's going on versus to hang on to the information, because of how these things have come up to the forefront. When you do call, this is what we're going to be looking for. Hopefully a description, number, where they're at, what they have, weapons they have, and any potential victims at the location. Keep in mind that when we respond, our primary concern is to stop the threat. It's not necessarily to render first aid or to help those that need help. Even though we want to, we've got to stop others from getting hurt. Try to remain calm, follow the instructions. Understand that there's going to be police agencies from all different jurisdictions coming in that are going to wear different uniforms, and we're all trained the same on this, usually pretty much nationwide. We're all trained in our response. I'm absolutely 100% confident that if we were to have an active shooter, that the police would respond as soon as they could. They would do what they need to do to enter a building and find the threat and try and stop it. I'm not worried about that. But when they do, understand that these things are kind of going to happen, and also that we could be asking for your help, and then also once we've contained the situation, we will work like anything to try and get medical aid to everybody. And we also train with fire and EMS on this, so that they're understanding too. And then also keeping your hands visible during the evacuation. Avoid making quick movements toward the officer, because our adrenaline is going to be charging just like everybody else. We're going to be very hinked up on this whole situation. And then also don't stop to ask us for help or directions, but keep in mind that however we came into a building will probably be a good way to evacuate. Because as we move through a building, we're trying to clear it as well as we can to try and find a threat. And then what do we do to prevent? I've got like 5 minutes here. So this is the book that I talked about earlier, written by a couple former Marines. I was a Marine, so I kind of, this is pretty cool. So, but during the Iraq War and a little bit in Afghanistan, in the very beginning, they were taking a lot of casualties on their combat patrols, and it was just trying to they had to change their mindset during their combat security patrols, and what they decided was, we need to get left of bang. We need to figure out how to stop something happening, one of these hostile attacks from happening prior to the bomb going off or prior to the trigger being pulled. So this book has a lot of good information in it, not only for military and law enforcement, but just citizens too, on what you can do to try and recognize behavior that leads toward one of these attacks. And that's what they're trying to teach the Marines that were out on patrol was, when you're patrolling through the streets of Fallujah, what do you see? What are the key behaviors that you see prior to an explosion going off? And they started to gather this information, and we're doing that in law enforcement and also in what we call the threat assessment teams. We are develop these threat assessment teams to try and identify situations and people that are posing a threat or possible threat to us, and then by behaviors, and then trying to intervene on their behavior prior to them getting to this point. And there's a certain progression that all these shooters have taken to where there's ideation about it, there's talking about it, there's planning about it, there's practicing about it, and then there's actually carrying it out. So at some point, before they get to carrying it out, if we can intervene, then we've done our job. And this is where I think we really need to focus our effort as an institution, is gathering that information from you all, from everybody who sees something that is just not right, or they notice some behavior in somebody that isn't fitting that person normally, or it's just a weird situation, and we need to know about it. And just because you call the police doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to get in trouble. And I think that's a big stigma that we've got to get past. And I know at times it's hard. Everybody thinks, you call the police, especially if you watch the news every night. Police show up, somebody's going to get taken to the ground, and it's going to be a bad deal. But that's a rare thing. 20 years on an apartment, I've used force on one of my own arrests. One arrest that I've 20 years arrested a lot of people. I've had to force somebody to the ground physically one time. That's it. So it doesn't happen as much as you think. And sometimes somebody getting arrested for something that might be minor, like say disorderly conduct, but we see a larger spectrum of bad behavior, might be a way for them to get into the system to get some mandatory mental health help from the court. So I've arrested drunk drivers not every one of them has done this, but several, I'd say maybe 2 or 3, they saw me later on and they said, you know, thank you for arresting me, because it got me the help I needed. And so this is a way to get the people some help. This study was a Safe School Initiative, and it looked at K through 12, and it came up with some of these key points that we focus on. They kind of led us toward threat assessment. It was done by the Secret Service and the Department of Education. So what we know about these incidents is, they're rarely impulsive. Contrary to what the news media might say about the person just snapped, that's not the case. They're rarely impulsive. They have planned for a long time. Columbine, they prepared for it for 2 years. Leakage. The perpetrators will leak at some point their plans or their ideation about what they're going to do. It's when you hear it on the news, well, yeah, they acted kind of weird, but, you know, he said he didn't like the government, or he didn't like the... So we know that they talk. And they journal a lot. They write things down in a handwritten journal quite often. And now with social media, they'll put it on Facebook. There's no accurate profile of the school shooter. They range the spectrum of socioeconomic profiles. Previous use of guns is a common thing, and also access to them. Most were not resolved. Most incidents were not resolved by law enforcement. Other students played a role in some capacity, and this isn't one. They didn't play a role in stopping it. They played a role in encouraging it, or in some cases, encouraging it, not necessarily like, yeah, you need to do that, but through bullying. Several cases show that bullying was a trigger. Most engaged in concerning behavior prior to the attack that others observed. And this is where threat assessment comes in, because Katie might observe it, and then somebody in housing might observe it, and then, oh, hey, law enforcement, we contacted him the other night and took him up to the hospital for a mental health evaluation. So then we've got these 3 sources of this behavior that, okay, we got an issue here we got to look at. And then here's a couple other studies based off of that Safe School Initiative. This one is a guide to threat assessment and how to run a threat assessment team and what we need to do with those. And then this guide is focused primarily on targeted violences on institutes of higher education. This is that 108-year study. Very, very good information. They're not very long either, so they're actually pretty easy to read. And I'm kind of running out of time, but out of these studies, what we know motivated or triggered the attacks. The highest trigger was, and some of them had overlapping, some of them might have 2 or 3 of these triggers, but these were deemed the most prolific out of the triggers, was a 70 or 39.9 or 33.9% were related to intimate relationship. And here on the university, especially with a live-on population of young adults who are, all of them are in some type of relationship, whether it's a intimate relationship or some type of social relationship. But I think that's a key area we need to be aware of, is that these relationships do go bad over time. Retaliation, and then all the others. And let's see, here are some overlapping ones out of that big study. Some pre-incident behaviors were noted in the investigations. Not all of them, but they just weren't noted. But as you see here, that in these incidences, stalking and harassment is a huge factor in targeted violence and targeted threats, and then some of the overlapping ones. So when we deal with stalking and harassment on a regular basis here at OSU. And then I'm going to just end it there. I'm going to email Katie the presentation so you can have that. And you can have all the resources and stuff too. So questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
So in some of these incidents, do you have data on where they do the shooting? Is it in the classroom? Is it in the commons? Is it in the quad?
Yeah,
outdoors, indoors?
It's broken down in that one, that campus attacks.
Okay.
They don't necessarily break down the statistics, but they do break down location. And in the other one, the FBI one, of the 160 attacks, they pretty much talk about each one, but there's only 12 of those that were on a higher ed campus. and they'll talk about them and tell you where they're at, but they didn't necessarily break them down on campus location. I actually, now that I'm talking about it, I'm thinking that in that study I read the classroom was the predominant
Because you have people.
location, because it's where, and it's where, you know, most of the attackers are students, as we saw. They're students or former students, so they go to what they know. You know, where students are gonna be congregating, that's in the classroom. So, good question. Yes, any other questions? I know I gotta take off. I gotta go deal with a relationship. I enjoyed it too. Yeah, so thank you for having me here. No, I'll come back to, you know, and we can do this again and even do a refresher and stuff and maybe a little bit more time if you have more people and slow it down a little bit and stuff, so. Okay, hopefully I didn't go too fast.
Oh, thanks.
Good. Okay.